like to welcome you to the Anacortes City Council meeting for Tuesday, May 26, 2020. I'm calling it to order at this time. Ms. Hunt, would you take the roll?
Mr. Carter? Mr. Carter?
Marcia, can you hear me?
I can, but you can't hear me.
Well, I'll take the roll then, or what's on? Okay, Mr. Walters?
Here.
Miss Leland McGrath?
Here.
Mr. Carter?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mr. McDougall?
Here.
Ms. Moulton?
Here.
Thank you. Has anyone I've forgotten? Miss,
Unmuted.
could you check on Miss Hunt for me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I will go and check right now.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Tell her I've taken roll. Okay, so I'll start now with announcements and committee reports. First of all, Mr. Kaufman, thank you very much. Got Granicus working today. He worked hard with the company, and we're up and running, so this meeting is live. So we're going to move on to item 2, which is announcements and committee reports. And item 2A is COVID-19 update. And I just had a couple of things I was going to mention tonight. First of all, the Boys and Girls Club plans on reopening Monday, June 1st at City Hall. They will let each child in through the locked door. They have protocol in place for taking temperatures. They're going to take just 24 students to start so they can maintain social distancing. So we're looking forward to hearing children in our basement once again. Secondly, I'm in the midst of just helping the community navigate our preparation for phase 2, and that's the phase in the governor's plan where we can reopen our retail and our downtown restaurants to 50%, our hair salons, nail salons. We have not been designated by the governor yet to reopen, but on Friday, the county commissioners, all mayors, Dr. Librand and Jennifer Johnson from the health department, we all wrote letters to the governor and his staff and asked for variance criteria for phase 2 because we believe in this county we can handle it. We have good protocols in place. If there are any anomalies with COVID, we know where those populations are and we're managing it well. And so we're hoping in the next few days to hear back from the governor's office. I heard there's a formal application process that the county health department is doing now to follow up on that letter. And usually within 48 hours to 72 hours after you do the formal application, the governor's office will respond. So we're very hopeful for a June 1st opening of phase 2. I continue to work with the restaurants, the downtown businesses, and just helping people understand the retail community. I know over Memorial Day, there were a lot of the retailers that were able to do some social distancing and some service from the curbside, so that was nice to see. So at this point, that's all I'm going to say. Tomorrow I will do my normal community briefing, and I'll just keep you all informed. So any questions? Okay. So the next item on the agenda tonight is item 2B.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Young.
Thank you. Just one quick question. I know this may have come up. It's been in some conversations I've had with neighbors that walked down the street or called me. It was about as some cities are using masks as part of that criteria, and I wanted to know if that is part of the discussion, even though you may not have made a decision as of yet. There are other cities that have done it. You know, of course, the grocery stores have done it, and I was just wondering if that was part of the
Well,
discussion.
we didn't put that per se, part of the decision in the letter to the governor, but here in the city of Anacortes, we continue to encourage that protocol. We think it's the safest thing. The Island Hospital has asked us to model that behavior because they truly believe that's why we have been so successful in our community. So we'll continue to monitor that. Thank you, Mr. Young. Okay, anything else? So we'll move on to item 2B, our Traffic Safety Committee.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, the Traffic Safety Committee met on the 19th, Tuesday, and we had just a couple of things. Avenue speed study that we talked about, the potential for reducing the speed limit. There really wasn't enough out-of-line data to justify it, so the committee didn't feel like there was any further action to bring to council. We discussed complaints about RV parking. I think the only 72-hour issues, complaints about RVs parking for more than 72 hours. There actually were no violations, but I think the complainant was concerned about how the RV looked, kind of thing. Seemed like it was well handled by our police department. And on that subject, I suggested if there's significant dollar costs for removing RVs that are not in compliance, and they should include that in their biannual budget if that's the case for one or two, depending on if that's an issue of removing RVs and abandoned RVs. And the case of the complainant was not abandoned. Let's see. And I think West 3rd, going to do another speed study based on some neighborhood complaints over there to see if there's some issues going on. I think that was about it, unless I think Ms. Moulton, if she has anything I missed.
Any other comments?
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
Thanks, Mr. Miller. That about covers it. We did talk about an incident of a car going off the road, coming into town on Highway 20 to turn onto R and missing the turn entirely and going through a fence, and how difficult it was to get out of where it landed. And if that was going to be an ongoing issue, but talking with staff and the APD, it seems like that is a rare occurrence, fortunately. And we also talked a little bit about curb painting, but that wasn't really nothing major there. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So we'll move on now to item 2C, which is our Finance Committee report.
Mayor Gear.
Ms. McDougall.
Mayor Gear. Jeremy, did you want to go?
I was just going to say that we had our meeting, and I was going through the slides of the presentation that's going to come up later tonight, and it looks like we're going to go over most of what we talked about.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. McDougall, did you want to add anything to that?
Nope. Finance Committee got a preview.
Perfect. Anything else? All right, we'll move on now to item 2D, our Fiber Committee.
Mayor Gear.
Yes, Ms. McDougall.
I can run with this one.
All right.
Fiber Committee met last Thursday afternoon, and we got a good positive report from the Fiber Department on progress on a number of fronts. As of Thursday afternoon, we had, let's see, I just lost my calculator, 146 total customers activated on the network. That's 115 residential and 31 businesses. And I actually just did a little comparison with the original sort of modeling spreadsheets that we used to put together the business model for the project. And I looked at the revenue mix that we're getting, and our average revenue per residential subscriber is actually $5.5 higher than what the model projected, which is great news, because if that trend holds, then essentially as we continue to build, it means either a greater revenue to expense ratio, or the ability to essentially become profitable and viable at something under 35%. And we're already so close to 35% in trial zones that looks good. Another positive that compared to the original business modeling is that the ratio of 100 meg to gigabit customers is actually almost, it's like 3 to 2 essentially. The model predicted like 90% would go for 100 meg, and only like 10% would go for gig, and it's much closer to 60-40. So that's also positive on the revenue side. So that's a couple good items. And then much of the other stuff that we covered, we're actually going to cover later tonight as well. So I'll let the fiber team take care of the rest of it.
Okay, great. Any other comments? All right, we'll move on now to item 2E, which is our Park and Recreation Committee. Any comments? Do we meet?
Mayor Gear?
Yes. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Moulton.
Mr. Young, would you like to?
No, go ahead. I'll join in at the end, but you always do such a wonderful job.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So we had a Parks Committee meeting with staff, Mr. Young, Mr. McDougall, and I on Thursday, May 21st, and we talked about phasing in more activities, more public areas available for our citizens to enjoy. And Mr. Lunsford came up with a spreadsheet that gives a good idea of what will be appropriate when, in which phases. For example, it looks like the senior center to be fully open will be phase 4. That's just one example. But in the meantime, they're following guidelines and the phase-in plan from the governor's office. And things have been happening. Coslin Park has been spruced up, as was the cemetery, if people noticed, for Memorial Day. Staff did a really great job. And people are pitching in above and beyond what their job descriptions are to really make sure everything is done the way it should be. A mower hit a wall at Coslin Park, so that is going to need to be fixed. So rec programs and summer events, as we know, many have been canceled, but Dustin has been working on some virtual events, Dustin and other staff. We want to keep the pet food drive happening that goes with Bark in the Park, maybe do that at Storvik Park, some kind of a virtual run for the Art Dash. And definitely the understanding is that people are getting bored and looking for more activities. So Parks is doing a great job coming up with ideas how they can participate virtually. Also working with the museum and other departments to really provide opportunities for our citizens to enjoy our parks. For example, soccer camps were canceled in person, but that needs to be phase 3. So they're talking about doing skills videos and different activities that people can participate in. Also baking classes, perhaps doing them online instead of in person, because those were super successful. So Dustin and Travis have been doing a fantastic job of working on those things. And I want to give a shout out to Mr. Lunsford and Mr. Vokes and all of staff really during this crisis. The regulatory aspects of their job are pretty tough. What they've done is they've maintained and kept open thousands of acres of parks in our city, which including the skate park. We were able to keep Washington Park open for camping until it was determined with the county that is probably not what we want to be doing right now. But that was very successful with social distancing. So I just want to thank Parks for giving us all the opportunity to stay sane in the way that we could be outside. I think they've shown Mr. Lunsford's shown tremendous leadership. People in parks have great attitudes. They're stepping up. They're doing beyond what they've been asked to do, and they're continuing to have great attitudes and help inform and guide people at trailheads, for example, who are really not necessarily looking for guidance. So I just want to give my heartfelt thanks to the Parks Department for helping keep Anacortes a place that we can all enjoy outside and stay sane. Also good news, the money came in for the boat launch, the $180,000 that was secured by Senator Lovelett. So I want to thank her because it's being used. It's getting great reports. So that's at Washington Park, and we're excited to have that in time for summer. We are also, or the utility improvements are almost done at Washington Park, and staff has helped get those estimated costs from $180,000 was the estimate, and it got done for $70,000, saving us $110,000. The Depot Plaza restroom project, they're waiting for drawings to go out to bid to prepare the site for the construction, and that's going to be within the next week or so. Another thing I wanted to mention is the Hornet trapping project. It's a multi-agency effort that has been led by our Parks Department, working with tribes, working with the county, working with the state, and they're going to involve volunteers when the time comes to help trap the murder hornets that are endangering our own bees. Let's see, 4th of July, there might be a virtual town photo. Still working on that. And then I want to touch on the Avenue Landfill question. So COVID slowed that down, of course. The process of the analysis of the data that the county collected. So the county is compiling that analysis of the data from their seep testing for the city of Anacortes and also for the Department of Ecology. So that's all been required, is being done. It's just been slowed up, but it's happening. So we'll get information from that hopefully soon. And I think that's it, but Mr. Young might have something to add.
You did an absolutely fabulous job. Your attention to detail is superb. But I wanted to add one thing about the senior center. They're still doing Meals on Wheels, and they're also doing some frozen meals for those who can walk up. And so, they're trying to figure out how they can continue to serve the community that's in need. But again, it's hard work, and the staff and the team are working wonderfully to try to make it so that we can continue to offer the service to our community that everybody wants. But thank you. That's all I really have to add. You went over it all. Thank you.
Hey, any questions?
Mayor,
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the insight on the A Avenue stuff, because when I was looking through the claims, as most of us, I know we all do, and I saw the $2,700 paid to Skagit or the Skagit Public Health, and I'm like, okay, where's the results? Because a lot of our citizens are asking for that, so I appreciate that. So everybody knows, okay, we're still waiting for the results, but apparently we cut the check, but I'm sure they're good for it.
Okay. All right, anything else? All right, we'll move on then to 2F, which is our Planning Committee report.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Ms. Leila McGrath?
I will do the Planning Committee report. So we just, Ms. Moulton and Mr. Walters and I just met at 5 o'clock today. So it's fresh in our minds. So the first thing was we talked about how we can encourage and support our restaurants and expand dining maybe out into the street. So Mr. Niesmer is working on possibly purchasing 10 parklets. This will probably be coming in front of council June 1st, but he seems to have secured parklets that were similar to the one we have, which would increase our numbers to 11, and at a pretty decent price point with some discounts. We're also kind of in discussions about whether or not we would shut down commercial, because there's been a lot of outpouring of support for that, so that we can kind of socially distance but also support our retail businesses and our restaurants. So either closing down on Friday at 5 p.m. so that they can have outdoor seating, and or also keeping it closed, Friday at 5 p.m. all the way Saturday all day, and then do Saturday dinner. This would then allow retail shops to kind of bring some of their product outside and do some social distancing there, and kind of encourage more walking and bicycling around downtown. We're not sure if Friday and Saturday or just one of those days makes the most sense, but I think we're all open to trying out and kind of gaining feedback that way. and we might be looking for volunteers because it's going to require some barricades for alleyways and cross streets, right? Set up and break down. And then also that Mr. Meismer is going to do a nice reminder parking letter for all of our downtown merchants so that they kind of are encouraged to go and park a block or two off the street so our local citizens can have use of our parking places. So that was good. These parklets will probably be permanent, which is kind of a neat option. And a lot of our restaurants are excited about that, and it could really help their bottom line. We also, Mr. Meismer reported that the planning department is working really well from home and remotely, that they're getting a lot of building permits through. We're at 27 building permits right now versus 12 the previous year. So they're just waiting for that next phase to open up so some of those new projects can get started. So that's an exciting thing. We also kind of talked about, while we can't, do some of our code updates that we'd like to have done, but it's in the forefront of our mind when we get to either phase 3 or phase 4 and can start to have public comment again, that, our number ones are critical areas, then shoreline master plan, then short-term rentals, and after that, hopefully addressing some of the tree ordinances that we've, and updating that we've kind of gotten some feedback that it's a concern for our citizens. And that, I think, is it, unless Ms. Moulton or Mr. Walters has anything to add.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
Thanks, Ms. Cleveland. You did a great job covering everything. The one thing that we talked about sort of at the end were the status of our small business development grants. The deadline for those is this Friday. I believe we have about 28 applications so far. I have heard back from some businesses in the community that they're concerned about the income verification requirement, asking their employees to prove that they make, that they're either low income or moderately low income. And Ms. Stewart in the planning department, who's helping to administer this program, has been in conversations with our HUD contacts. The income verification requirement is from HUD. It's their money that they're giving us, so it's a little bit tricky, but it's not as onerous as it seems. So I would encourage any businesses who are sort of on the fence about applying, because they understandably don't want to pry into their employees' financial lives too deeply, I would encourage you to call Ms. Stewart at the planning department or email her. Her information is on the planning department page of the city website, because it's not as onerous as it sounds. So I'm just going to encourage any business owner who's considering applying to please apply, because this is a grant. You don't have to pay it back, and it can help. Hopefully it can help you stay in business and thrive. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments tonight on any of the committees?
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Walters.
The parklet deal that Ms. Cleveland McGrath mentioned will be substantially different from the parklet that we have now, and the way that worked, in that the parklets will be dedicated to restaurants. And that's an idea that we brought back from the town of Banff and other locations where the parklet is used as an extension of the sidewalk and available specifically to a business. We want them to look uniform. We want them to be clearly an obviously allowed use of the street, and that is going to require some policy. So I imagine the planning committee will be working on generating some suggestions for a formal written policy for this going forward.
I might also comment, it has to go through the LTAC committee also, because we're looking at LTAC funding. So there's some things we need to do. Yeah.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Young.
Yes. What I was thinking, though, is that as this moves forward, I know you guys are going to delve deeply and do the due diligence to make sure everything is wonderful. If any of the designs that you're working with that you think you might be leaning more toward, if some of those could be sort of sent over to us and we just take a peek at it, so as this progresses, we're also with you in the whole process.
Okay. I will pass that on to planning and, because it does have to come back to you for final approval, so. Okay, anything else?
And FYI, the design of the parklet that Mr. Meismer is looking at is just identical to the parklet that we already purchased, so that we maintain the standardization there.
Thank you, Ryan. That's perfect. Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, at this time, if I don't hear any other comments, I'm moving on to item 4 under other business. We'll do 4A. It's our monthly finance update and COVID-19 impact. This is a discussion item tonight. Open for public comment. Mr. Hoagland, are you there?
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller?
We need to do the consent agenda, I think.
Oh, I jumped right past that. Thank you. So we'll back up to item 3, which is our consent agenda, items A through E.
All right, Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller?
I move to approve items A through E on our consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Yes. So we have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. Young to approve our consent agenda items 3A through E. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we'll move on to other business. Item 4A, our monthly finance update and COVID-19 impacts. Mr. Hoagland. Are you there?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, having a little bit of technical difficulty.
There you are.
Okay. There we go. Can you see that screen now?
Not
My little PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a few slides I put together. I wanted to go through. This is actually a screen grab from a webinar that I was watching last week. I just thought it was interesting. So this was looking at April retail sales, and this is nationwide. It's data that we don't have available at the city level yet, but I thought it was interesting that virtually every segment of retail sales declined, some pretty significantly in April compared to March, like home furnishings, electronics down 58%, 60%, clothing down 78%, food and drink down almost 30%, gas stations down 20%. So just across the board, a lot of bad news in April. And along with that, this is from that same webinar I watched, the GDP Now indicator. So this is it's a mathematical, from my understanding, it's a mathematical model that the Atlanta Federal Reserve uses to estimate what the quarter's GDP is going to be. So as they get data, they plug it into this model, and it calculates that estimate. So it's super interesting. I went to the website, and you can see the history of those estimates as they get more data in and they plug it into the model. You can see, on this date it calculates this level. The next date they get some more data and it calculates the next level. And it's super interesting, but it's a little depressing to see how it just kept going, lower and lower and lower every piece of data they got. But keep in mind, this is just 1 month's worth of data. It's through April. But based on April data, that model is indicating about a 40% drop in GDP for second quarter, which is, really astounding when you think about it, compared especially to the last recession in, I think, first or second quarter 2009. It was less than a 7% drop that quarter, first second quarter 2009. So 40%, it's hard to even get my head around that. But again, 1 month data, but I thought it was interesting, and I guess I just wanted to share this because it's just kind of painting a picture of bad retail sales news that we don't have yet, but I guess I'm trying to bolster ourselves for that coming up the next couple of months. The one thing that we did receive, May sales tax, we received on this past Friday. So this is updated compared to what's in your packet. I'll get this updated packet to Marcia after the meeting and get that reloaded onto the city website. But the May sales tax that came in, we had an expectation of about 412,000, and what we received was 335,000. So that in itself is about a 19% decrease, 19% difference. But I did a little more analysis, thinking that if the majority of that impact came the second half of the month, what that would look like, as the quarantine orders came into effect more towards the middle of the month. So assuming we had a normal first half of the month and it met expectation, it would have generated about 206,000 in sales tax, and that would have left the remaining 129,000 to be generated in the second half of the month. So that difference of 77,000 then would be closer to a 30% decrease, which I suspect is more likely the case looking forward into next month and the month after. With my expectation, that's more likely going to be the case. And we've put plans in place. We've talked about before that we've identified around 2.1 million in budget cuts at this point without affecting staff. So, if our sales tax comes in at 40% less than what we're expecting, then we will be, I think, well postured to meet that. So maybe there's a little bit of silver lining in that data. This is something I always enjoy looking at. I hope you do too. If not, let me know. I can remove the slide, but it's looking at consumption, water consumption, comparing 2019 to 2020. And this is the first 4 months of the year, January through April. So in 2019, this column is total consumption by these different customer segments. So the refinery customers, the other wholesale customers, and then our retail base. And then this second column is 2019, the change in consumption from March to April. And you can see almost across the board in our wholesale customers, they had a decrease in consumption from March to April last year. And then in a retail base across the board, there was an increase in consumption. So this year, 2020, January through April, looking at the change from March to April, almost every segment or almost every customer had an increase in consumption, except for this one only, which probably makes sense. There's significant closures to the casino and hotel out there. And then this is our retail water base. Commercial customers decreased. Now this is from March to April. Consumption for commercial customers decreased by 158,000 cubic feet. For multifamily, it increased 65,000, and for residential, it increased 942,000 cubic feet. And then you can compare that to last year and see what a significant difference that is. In fact, last year, March to April, commercial increased 185,000, which is about 7.5%, and 158,000 decrease this year was about another about 7.5% again decrease. So, combining those together, it's about a 15% swing in the commercial consumption. And then this far column is looking at the change for the first 4 months of the year, 2019 to 2020, and you can see most of our customer base, most of our wholesale base has decreased consumption between those two periods for the first 4 months of each year, and then we've increased. So overall, and this is different from this error was pointed out to me by Ms. Moulton. Thank you for those sharp eyes, Ms. Moulton. But comparing total consumption 19 to 20 for those first 4 months, it decreased to 2.8 million cubic feet. The last thing I would point out in solid waste, we saw this during the last recession. There was a significant drop in solid waste consumption. Residential and commercial construction generate a lot of our solid waste consumption, as well as a lot of our commercial entities that were closed for the last couple of months. So it's not entirely surprising to see this decrease in April consumption. So this is looking at the solid waste revenues. 2019 is in April 372,000. 2020 is 378,000. So still an increase of 6,000 in revenues, but I would have expected it to be more around the 6 to 7% increase, like it was the first 3 months of the year, rather than 1.6% increase. But those are, it's just 1 month. Construction is back again. Restaurants are starting to open again, so hopefully this is just a short-lived decrease in utility consumption. So that's all I have for those areas. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. We can move on to the Excel worksheet. So these are the same set of charts I show every month. This is our primary revenue streams. Well, it's revenue and shared revenue from the state, but you can see our three primary tax revenue streams: property tax, utility tax, and sales tax. And the first 4 months of the year represent a third of the year. So kind of all things being equal, you'd expect revenue collection to be in that ballpark. Property taxes is one I did want to point out. 32% collection through April is right where we were through April in 2019. So that revenue stream appears to be stable. Same with utility taxes. We'll talk about that a little more. And then sales tax, we'll talk about a little more as well. So overall, our tax collection and shared revenue collection is 34%, which at this point is about where we would expect to see that on a typical year. Sales tax, we talked about this already. Here's the actual collection for the month, $335,000. We set our sales tax budget based on the year. So for the year, we've budgeted for $4,950,000 in sales tax, and based on collection metrics, historical collection metrics, we generally would have expected by May to have collected $1.844 million, and at this point we're $1.813. So compared to our budget, we're down 1.7%. Compared to the prior year, we're down 4.8%. Utility tax, this is a combination of both our private utilities and public utilities. Public utilities are the city utilities, private is electric, gas, telephone. And we had seen in our trends that private utility tax was decreasing, so we budgeted pretty conservatively on that. And you can see at this point, our utility tax collection is still exceeding what we budgeted by nearly 16%. Building revenues, you talked about a little bit. What you talked about in the committee update was more current information than what this is. This is through the end of April. So at that point, the building department had issued 23 permits at $226,000 for the year. So nearly half the permits issued all of last year through the end of April. Real estate excise tax through April has continued to be strong. Hopefully that continues. It'll be interesting to see how that goes for the next month or two. I saw a webinar today that showed mortgage applications had ticked up recently. I don't remember now if it was a monthly or weekly metric, but it had ticked up compared to the prior period. So it was positive news. Currently, we have about $3.5 million in total REIT reserves. We have budgeted to use 1.3 of that this year. No, sorry. Yeah, that's right. So we budgeted to use 1.3. Impact fees hasn't changed a lot since our last time we met. Streets, we have Total cash balance of $820,000. We budgeted $575,000 to be used this year. Most of that on the Oaks Avenue roundabout. In parks, there's $333,000. We budgeted use $200 of that, and that's for the cemetery project. Lodging tax. This is interesting. So again, this is based on March stays. So this is May's lodging tax based on the lodging stays in Anacortes in March, and revenues for that was down 71% compared to the prior year. So hopefully our sales tax don't follow that significant of a trend. Pretty significant. Okay, major funds. Same thing we looked at every year. There's nothing really unusual here to see. You need to take the revenue number here with the understanding that we do accrue a number of our revenue streams, our tax revenue streams. So that's why I track all of those separately in these charts: sales tax, utility tax, because we do accrue those back into the period that they were earned. So this total revenue number will vary slightly from actual cash in the bank. But with the property tax collection so far through April, all of our tax-funded funds are looking pretty good, and there's nothing unusual in any of this activity. Fireman's Pension Fund, that revenue stream, the primary revenue stream in that fund is fire premium insurance tax we get from the state. We get about $24,000 a year. That's why that looks so off right now. It doesn't get any property tax. At least this year, it's not allocated for property tax. And everything else is trending the way we would expect. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mayor Gear?
Yes.
It's Miller. Hey, thanks. It was a great presentation because it's given us just a little taste of the economic impact. But if you could remind us the trailing indicators that we're only representing March data in sales tax, and the other ones refresh us on the trailing indicators, if you would. So we're 2 months behind on the revenues we get from the state. These other revenues, utility tax, building revenues, those are in real time. Those are posted the month that we get those. REIT comes from the county, and that lags by 1 month. Right. Perfect.
So, sales tax. So Mayor and I talked a lot about this. We're very anxious to see what June sales tax is going to look like. That'll be our first real look at the impact.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I believe that the sales tax will be closer to what you don't want to see, Mr. Hoagland, closer to the LTAC numbers for the month of April, because our downtown was shut down. So I can't imagine. I don't want us to have any expectation that it will be anything but dismal. But even despite that, we've identified enough savings on our budget to weather that. And even if it went into the following month, I feel like we're in good shape. We go into the third or fourth month, we're going to have some other conversations. But I think right now, Steve's done a really great job with the other directors, identifying, up to $2.1 million. And even without sales tax for a couple of months, we don't come close to that $2.1 million. So I'm feeling like we can breathe easy, at least for now, and hopefully we have a good summer. Yeah.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hoagland, for this really excellent presentation. I feel like I learned a lot from the materials we were provided in our packet, and then having you go into more detail about them. I just want to say good job budgeting. conservatively, and also finding $2.1 million in budget cuts without affecting staff. That's a great thing. So thank you to you and the finance department.
Thank you. And I do have to say, I was really pleased with how the directors rallied around that assignment from the mayor. We all worked, I thought, really well together to come up with those budget savings.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hoagland this evening? Thank you, Steve. Great job.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, we'll move on to item 4B, which is also open for public comment. This is Resolution 2091. It's updating the unified fee schedule for our fiber service suspension. This is an action item, and I think Mr. Hoagland is also taking this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is, I think, a pretty easy one. We talked about this with Ms. Hsu last week, and this is giving the option for fiber customers to be able to suspend fiber service at a reduced rate of charge for if they were going to be out of the city or unable to use their service for at least a 60-day period. And so that cost would be reduced to $20 per month during that period of time that the service would be suspended. So this is the section out of our unified fee schedule, and we have that ready to go. That will be updated to the city website when every council is ready to approve. So any questions, we'd be happy to address those.
In here?
Yes, Ms. Moulton.
I just want to mention that I appreciate that the service suspension is available to residential customers or business class customers who have already fulfilled their 12-month contract. And I also like that it is for a minimum of 60 days.
Okay. Any other comments? Do we want to take action tonight, or do we want to continue the conversation?
Mayor Gear,
Mr. Miller.
I move we approve Resolution 2091, updating the unified fee schedule for fiber service suspension.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. McDougall to approve Resolution 2091, updating the unified fee schedule suspension. Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Carter? Mr. Carter?
Can you hear us, Jeremy? Okay.
Got it. Motion carries.
All right. Thank you. All right, at this time, we'll move on then to item 4C, our contract award for slurry seal type 2, number 20-002, TRN-002. This is the action item, and Mr. Buckemeyer, welcome.
Good evening. Everybody hear me? Got my earphones in this time.
Can you speak up a little bit?
All right, thanks. Let me turn that, get a little closer. All right, thank you. So I was talking with Mayor Gear today, and we decided that I should take about 3 minutes and give council and public an explanation of what a slurry seal is, and maybe a short progress report of sorts on how we're doing with our pavement management plan, and then a future strategy, if you will. So just very quickly, and I know the council, most of the council is aware of this, but so slurry seal is a big part of our pavement management system. We use slurry seal together with crack sealing and chip sealing or fog sealing and conventional full depth asphalt overlay. And occasionally we get inquiries from the public questioning why we're slurry sealing a road that's a particular street that's right next to a street that needs it even worse, right? So what I like to do is use my my house maintenance comparison, if you will. So much like the wood siding on your home is our street system. So it's more economical to paint your wood siding than it is to replace it. And applying a slurry seal to a roadway is like painting your home's wood siding. It prevents or delays that UV damage. It keeps water from getting beneath the surface and causing damage from freeze-thaw or transport of the fine materials. So if your wood siding is really bad, you have to replace it, and it's a waste of resources to paint it. Same way with a street. If your street is really bad shape, you have to completely replace it, and it's a waste of resources to put slurry seal on it. So this is an interesting part. A street generally has to be in pretty good condition for us to make it eligible for a slurry seal. On a scale of 1 to 100, we use a thing called a pavement condition index, 0 being a really bad street and 100 being a really good street or perfect street. A street generally has to be between 60 and 80 psi for it to be eligible for a slurry seal. Almost always we have to perform a few spot repairs on the streets before we can slurry seal them, and I think you saw that last month in one of our contracts that we let out. We've been into our slurry seal program now for 3 years pretty intensively. We started on the west end of town, Skyline, generally the Skyline area, and we're working our way to the east. We have about 2 years to go to complete all of these slurry seal eligible streets, and then we will start over again, just doing those streets over again, because there's about a 5 to 7, depending on traffic, 10-year lifespan of a slurry seal. It's a very cost-effective method. Comparatively, it costs about 14 cents to slurry seal a length of road that would cost us $1 to overlay it. So it's very, very cost-effective. Okay, just getting to a progress report. So we've made some pretty significant progress in increasing our average pavement condition index across the city. There's only a handful of arterial streets that are left to tend to. However, there's a lot of residential streets left to tend to. We have over 450 street segments that our current funding level doesn't allow us to adequately address, mostly our residential streets. This means that the pavement condition on those streets is far too degraded to slurry seal, or even, in some cases, to even overlay, which means we'd have to completely reconstruct a lot of those segments. Our transportation benefit district funding was not designed to correct every deficiency in our street system. Currently, if we were going to try to correct every street in town, that would be about a $30 million price tag. However, the funding that we have done has increased our average pavement condition index from roughly 63 to 64, this was when we started, to now about a 65 to 66 average. Now that's an average, right? So there's going to be some that are a lot lower than that and some that are better than that. Let's see, just a few more points here. Each overlay, not a slurry seal, but each overlay requires that we bring all of our ADA facilities, sidewalks, curb intersections, ramps, crosswalks, up to current standards. Not the standard that they were when they were installed, but today's standards. Sometimes that cost can be as much as or even more than the overlay itself. So we're kind of picky on the ones that we overlay. Another note, our pavement management strategy approach, if you will, is a systematic approach. We evaluate a number of things when we choose what streets to focus on. Like the condition of the utilities, what what's the condition of the water line of the street? How old is that water line? What's it made out of? What's the condition of the sewer line? What's the age of that sewer line? What's it made out of? What condition is the ADA facilities? And how much ADA funding do we have available? What's the condition of our drainage system? Or is there a potential for private development in the near future? And of course, the pavement condition, how bad is it? And another important consideration that comes up from time to time and is extremely hard to predict is grant opportunities. Sometimes there's grants that become available. Sometimes it's very, very little warning. So we play that into it too. And I'm not going to go over this tonight. Mayor Gear and I decided it might be better for a future meeting, but there is a list, in our transportation element, a list of unfunded street projects that don't fall under the pavement, maintenance category, but they're just large projects, sometimes small, but they're really unfunded. So, having said that, now the actual agenda item.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Walters.
Before you get to the actual agenda item.
You bet.
Since you brought it up. Increasing the PCI from 63 to 65 sounds kind of ridiculous for the amount of money that we've spent in the last couple of years. But I think that the reason it's like that, assuming that's right, is because you've got all these streets that nobody really drives on compared to the streets that everybody drives on, and all of those miles of streets are weighted the same.
Correct.
So could we come up with some other measure, call it Fred's Condition Index, that would give appropriate weight based on the number of vehicles on the streets? So, for instance, you do D Avenue and raise its condition from 20 to 80, it should get more weight than a side street that, only the residents of that street drive on. We should have some way of measuring that so we have some more realistic measure of what we've been doing with this Transportation Benefit District money over the years. Is there an established methodology for that? Or if not, can we make one up, document it, and can we describe all this on a web page where we can refer to it over time?
Yeah, thank you. So what we can do, and what we do is measure the average PCI of different classifications of streets. So we could demonstrate what the average PCI is of our arterial collector system, and then compare that to the average PCI of our residential system. So you would see that the average PCI of our arterial system has gone up much more dramatically than the PCI of our residential system. I just chose to kind of use the average, because once you start drilling into the detail, it gets a little cumbersome. But I can certainly provide council with all of that detail if you'd like.
So as you alluded to, it's sort of a black box. We don't have a good sense, and it's difficult to quickly explain to people why streets are chosen, and if you can give that a little more transparency, again, by putting it on a web page that is maintained and that we can find and that we can send to people when they ask, I think that would benefit us all.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Yep.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
Yes. Just in that line, Fred, Mr. Buckermeyer, I realize the thought that goes into this process, metrics and everything else, to come up with the reasonable solution for the best use of money. Still, there are those, I think you mentioned 400 residential streets, that the people that live on that street are, glad that 12th is doing wonderful, but they worry about their own street. So at some point, I would love for us to figure out a way to take a look at how we can increase those whose the PCI index is far below any of the others, and see if there's a way we can begin to address it even more so, and just sort of discuss it. I think that you guys have done a great job, but there are streets in our city that need help, and people are not very happy about it. And I think that they probably have felt that they've been patient for a long time. So if we can figure out a way to begin to address that with them and figure out how we can do it, I would love to see that. I know you're going to work on it, and you know, you guys have done a great job, but I just want to bring that forward. Thank you.
So, Mr. Young, if I could comment, yes, there are many streets like that. And I think when 7 years ago, when we had this, 6.5 years ago, when we had this discussion, I think we realized it was going to cost us about $60 million at that time to bring most of the streets up to the 66% or 70%. And we chose to do the transportation benefit district and pay as we go. But as Mr. Buckemeyer just pointed out, we still have a group of streets that we can't really help with this the way we're funding it. It's like the $30 million price tag. So I think that'll be the discussion for the council. I mean, someday do we have to bond it? Or we make the decision residential streets may never be, you know, where we want them to be because of the cost of it. So it's a real big discussion, and it comes with a really big price tag to get all the streets where we all really want them. We all want them. We just, you know, it's what we can afford, and so I would just add that to the discussion moving forward.
If I could continue, I totally agree with you, totally understand that it is very rational. I'm not talking about just spending money, because I know that you guys are doing the due diligence, because we do have some good roads here. The only thing I'm advocating for is that at some point on some of those roads that are needing help, I'd love to see the plan how we're beginning to address those, even in a small scale. So
Absolutely.
Whatever it is we have to do, that's all I'm asking for. All right.
Okay.
Very good.
Other comments?
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mayor, for reminding us of I remember that discussion of PCI, and it's one tool to measure the streets overall. It's not a perfect tool. It's one of the main tools in the toolbox. But I appreciate Mr. Walter's suggestion on that to break them apart. And to Mr. Young's point, we did, move to approve the change in the sales tax versus the car tab TBI with the express plan of saying we were going to try to touch on some of the residential roads. So maybe just to highlight more of what that part of the plan is and how much we are spending on that part. Clearly this is part of it because we're hitting residential roads by preserving them, but right. maybe that's what is needed a little bit more.
Right. And I know in Public Works they're working on putting together a list of those streets that go beyond an overlay, those streets that would have to be a total rebuild. So at least we're acknowledging, and I know Mr. Barkmeyer is going to work with Cardiograph and his staff. It will be a daunting task, but I think maybe we can acknowledge what those streets are. Maybe the neighbors, the residents at least will feel heard that their street made it onto a list. How we fund it, I'm not sure. Thank you, Mr. Barkmeyer. Really good overview.
Thank you.
So did you have something else you wanted to talk to us tonight about?
I kind of wanted to get this contract passed, but it's totally up to council.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So yes, we are seeking to award a contract in the amount of $212,012.23 to, probably change the name, Doolittle Construction LLC to do this year's slurry seal project. There's a map included with the packet, but generally speaking, it's residential streets in the area bounded by 12th, 37th A and H, and then a long stretch of 22nd Street from H to commercial. There were 4 bids received. They're, again, in the packet. Doolittle Construction LLC was the lowest at just a little over $212,000. The engineer's estimate for it was $322,742. There's a 60-day window on the contract. The engineering division here has a very good track record with public outreach and all that, and that none of that will change. As a matter of fact, it'll even get better. They've kind of upped their game every year. And the time frame for starting this is again weather dependent, but obviously in a stretch of nice weather. So it is our recommendation that we authorize the mayor to sign that contract.
Mayor Gear,
Mr. Miller,
I move that we authorize the mayor to sign the contract as presented with Doolittle Construction LLC in the amount of $212,012.23 to perform the slurry seal Type 2 project.
Second?
we have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Ms. Moulton to approve the contract award for the slurry seal. Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Mr. Buckemeyer. Very informative.
Thank you.
Now we move on to item 4D, also open for public comment. This is the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee appointment. This is an action item. Mr. Miesemer.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So it is that time of year again to appoint the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee for 2020. There are 3 members of the committee that are required to collect the tax. That's Pam Audette, Mark Leone, and Russ Olivier, and 3 members authorized to be funded by the tax for a total of 6. That's Eric Shore, Andy Stewart, and Carla Locke. And then one of our city council members, Mr. Matt Miller, is the chair of the committee. All of the members have expressed interest in continuing on with the committee. And in fact, we're having our first Lodging Tax Advisory Committee meeting on Wednesday morning, this Wednesday morning. The lodging tax application process will begin on June 1 and run through September 30th, with review by the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee beginning in October. The 2019 funding for projects was $335,415 plus change, and with most of the events canceled this year, there will probably be a bit unspent in the account. Right now, we have about $271,000 left in there, according to Mr. Hoagland. And by the end of the year, we could be somewhere up around $750,000, $800,000 in the lodging tax budget for expenditures on contracts coming up. So with that, staff recommends reappointment of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee members, and I will keep you updated on our progress in the next few days. I hope to be back to council on June 1st with a recommendation from the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee on some parklets. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any comments?
Mr. Miesemer? This is Mr.
Young.
Young. Yeah, I just have a question. I've taken a look. The people look absolutely, seem absolutely wonderful for, for the committee, and, the committee has done a stellar job. I was just curious, were there additional people to make application to sit on the Lodging Tax Committee? And after review of them, or can you just elaborate a little bit on that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Young. So we had no applications for the Lodging Tax Committee. We also have an ad in the paper for a Planning Commission opening. So if somebody's interested, please apply.
Okay.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, as the current chair of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, I'm I was just happy that the folks continue to volunteer. I mean, these are, you know, hoteliers and trying to run tourism-related businesses. So it's nice that they all volunteered to do another term. So, you know, I also volunteered to do another term. They were going to make me look bad if I didn't. But no, it's a great group of folks. They understand they understand the importance and the value of how we collect lodging tax and do their very best to apply it in the appropriate way. And during this pandemic, we're going to take a look at how we can help out you know, those businesses here tomorrow. You'll hear more from council on that. Maybe from me if you choose to let me continue to chair it.
I totally agree with you. It is a great group of people. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. McDougall, you have any thoughts?
I was going to make a motion.
Oh, wonderful.
With a big thank you to the appointees as well. I move to approve appointment of Matt Miller as chair, Mark Leone, Eric Shore, Russ Olivier, Andy Stewart, Pam Audette, and Carlo Locke as committee members to represent the city in the review and recommendation of projects that encourage tourism in Anacortes.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McDougall, a second by Mr. Young, to approve the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee appointments as presented by Mr. McDougall. Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So moving on now to item 4E, contract award for the municipal broadband network library to the MST, aerial areas 2, 3, 4, and 6. Ms. Shu.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you about the contract award to Robinson Brothers Construction. I'm going to bring up a map. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. There we go. And I apologize for the size, but being probably very small on your screens. So we are moving forward with the expansion into the remaining aerial sections of the city. And this contract is specifically covering areas 2, 3, 4, and 6. So it's for those 4 areas, covering a total of 566 premises. It's the contract totals $204,433.45. Utilizing Robinson Brothers Construction as we did with Old Town and M Avenue. The contract would begin likely in July, and then we would be able to follow immediately after with the actual installations in those areas. The other 2 areas that are listed are Section 1 and 5. That is, design work is still underway, and we'll be looking at the final design next week, so you can know that we'll be coming later for those remaining sections. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about the contract.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. McDougall.
Ms. Shu, I forgot to ask in committee, area section 2 passes South Commercial. Do we have a sense for, of the 566 buildings passed, roughly how many are businesses versus residential?
So I don't have that breakout. The one thing that this area here is primarily business. It's hitting the east side of commercial on these businesses. So additional work will be necessary to get the north side of those businesses.
To get connected to the west side of commercial, though, can can we just do service drops from the east side MSTs?
Yes.
Great, great. Well, the pricing on a per premise or per business passed for this is actually, it's good. It's basically lower than what the original business model projected for aerial cost to pass a given set of addresses. So this looks good. Thank you.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Miller?
I'm not sure I've got a question, but just kind of a comment. I think it's a milestone approval. Well, I guess the first question for Ms. Hsu is, clearly, I read the packet, we're well inside of the previously authorized council budget. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. My comment is it's kind of a milestone because we're clearly going to spend a significant amount of money to go past our original pilot areas. I'm comfortable doing this. I just think we ought to acknowledge that.
One thing I would like to mention is that as we're looking at the business plan, we talked about initially doing the Old Town and M Avenue, but that we were needing to pass another 1,000 premises during this pilot area. So this is consistent with the business plan to do that expansion.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Mr. McDougall?
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate Ms. Hsu's point that the original business model projected roughly like a $3 million project for passing the first roughly 2,200, 2,300 buildings. So, yeah, we're well in line with that. So that's good.
Other discussion?
Ms. Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton?
Thank you. Ms. Hsu, so is it, I'm not sure I heard this correctly, if aerial section 2 is completed, that does mean that businesses on the west side of Commercial Avenue would be able to get internet from that completion, or would that require further?
There'll be some aerial areas that we can get through crossing aerial lines across the Highway 20, but we will need some additional build out to be able to get the full west side.
Thanks.
Okay, additional comments, thoughts?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. McDougall?
With thank you and acknowledgement to Mr. Miller that this is a bit of a milestone and exciting. I move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign a contract with RBC in the amount of $204,433.45 to perform the construction of municipal broadband network expansion library to the MSTs in aerial areas 2, 3, 4, and 6.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McDougall and a second by Mr. Miller to award the contract award for municipal broadband network as stated by Mr. McDougall. Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Hsu. Very exciting time. It's great. So at this time, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you for a really great conversation this evening. We got a lot of good work done. So see you next week. The meeting's adjourned. Bye-bye.